wonder, do we have enough copies for everyone? Anybody still missing a copy? Okay. We're starting on chapter 8 tonight, which is page 89. So we'll just read into a little bit and see how far we can get tonight exploring this. The chapter is called Direct and Gradual. Well, the patriarch was living at Baolin, Jeweled Wood Monastery in Shaoxi. Venerable Master Shen Shu resided at Jade Spring, Yutren Monastery in Jingnan. Both teacher schools flourished in their time, and everyone called them Southern Neng and Northern Xiu. So it was that there came a division into the two schools, Northern and Southern, Direct and Gradual.
Could you speak up just a little? The people in the back can't hear.
Oh, well, maybe I can speak up, but if we turn the fan down or off, is that possible? We got a lot of BTU in the room tonight with all these bodies. Maybe we can turn the heat. You all look like you're dressed for the north woods here. Maybe we can go lighter. Is it done? No heat. No heat. This is the northern show. Okay. So I'll try to speak a little louder until the fan completely stops. So it came to be this division between these two schools. Their students, however, did not understand the meaning of this distinction. And so the master said to the assembly, and now we're quoting Hui Neng talking to his assembly. He says, the Dharma is originally a single school. It is people who think north and south. The Dharma is of one kind, but the understanding of it may be direct or gradual. So why the terms direct and gradual? Dharma itself is neither direct nor gradual, but it's people who are sharp or dull. Hence the terms direct and gradual. So we're going on, after the Sixth Patriarch got the robe and bowl, we know he left and traveled. He went into hiding for a while, lived among hunters to protect his life and to get out of the heat, literally, and of the pressure that the competitors at the Shen Shu, when they were studying with the Fifth Patriarch, were after the robe and bowl as well. So that this became the prize. Hui Neng himself got it, but was warned by the Fifth Patriarch to go into hiding. He went into hiding for a number of time. Then it's very interesting. He knew or decided or realized it was time to come out of hiding and to teach. I think how he knew this is very interesting. We don't really know what prompted him, but we do know that his life was not necessarily out of danger because of this. So in his lifetime and in his teaching, there was always a constant sense of, I wouldn't sort of like pressure, but danger. This had many aspects to it. One of this we'll see tonight had to do with who the state endorsed, who the state gave homage to as far as a teacher goes. So Master Shen Shu, everybody remembers who Master Shen Shu is, right? He has become the head of this school called Jade Spring in the north, and Hui Neng has gone to Baolin in the south. So they both stayed teaching, they both stayed active, and it says here they both had followers. So it wasn't that Shen Shu, because he didn't have the robe and bowl, wasn't popular and didn't have followers. He obviously had them. And people at this time began to talk to them about this as they were two different sects, or even in the Buddhist sense, in China at the time, it's almost like a different religion, because people become so attached to the differences between different schools or different teachers that they start to reify it into something really concrete. And it's almost as if it's no longer, mine is Buddhism, I don't know what yours is. You know, we call you the Southern school. So they use these terms. This has happened to Buddhism throughout the world as it moved out of that direct time and the teaching of the Buddha in India. As it moved, originally we knew that it was just called the Buddha Dharma. It was the Dharma of the Buddha. And in the monasteries, and we know this from the records of the monks like Xuanzang and others who went to India, that at that time, monks and nuns cultivated in these monasteries what we now call different schools of Buddhism, whether it was using mantras and mandalas, they were using what we now call Pali or Theravada text or orientations, and Mahayana. Some were doing Vinaya practice, some were doing sitting meditation, some were doing recitation practices, but they saw them as just different practices of a common root. They didn't see them as different isms or different teachings or different religions. And Xuanzang and others reported this at the time. So early on, even after the Buddha passed away, people still felt they belonged to a common family, although they were doing different practices. But even within that, they saw this practice as more or less suitable to different individuals taken up at that time, all aiming towards the same goal. But over time, human nature being what it is, and this text really talking directly to our tendency to grab and attach to things, even when we're practicing a teaching of non-attachment. And so these become kind of isms, or they become schools or sects. And then the conflict starts with mine is better than yours is lesser than mine, and so on and so forth. And then you can't get enlightened with your schooling, with my teaching, and so forth. And so what becomes a method of cultivation turns into a necklace of identity almost, if I could say that. In other words, the identity trumps the actual purpose of it. And then people start to define themselves as this. And of course, the Sixth Patriarch says, a mind like this is in opposition to the way. This is from an earlier passage. The mind of win and lose, mine's better, yours worse, is a mind of fighting and contention, and it stands in opposition to the way. You can never really penetrate to the root of the source when you're caught up in this kind of fighting and dichotomizing. And so, nonetheless, even though these two schools came and the teachers apparently were not necessarily bad-mouthing each other. I read this text and I don't see necessarily in what we're reading tonight that Shen Shu was bad-mouthing Hui Neng, or Hui Neng was bad-mouthing Shen Shu. Nonetheless, the disciples, it says, didn't understand the meaning of the various distinctions, and they got into a kind of mind of fighting. So this statement by Master Hui Neng is really, really significant. He says the Dharma is originally a single school. It's people who make these distinctions. And the Dharma is of one kind, but the understanding of that may differ. And that's in the Buddha, in another text, he says, my Dharma is of one flavor. And he compares it to honey. And he says it's at the beginning, at the middle, at the end, it has a single flavor, and that's the flavor of liberation, of awakening. And so, even though we may call it different things, it has one purpose and it has one flavor. But people access it, understand it, take it up, or reject it on the basis of their potentials and their causes and conditions, their affinities, their obstacles and impediments. This is not simple. and this is where the whole idea of upaya or fangbian comes from. The Buddha realized that this Dharma being a teaching of liberation, it had to be specifically geared towards the actual entanglement of any one person. And so talking to someone's conditions was the key for this being Dharma. And I explained this a couple times last week. In fact, the Buddha said, if it doesn't address where you're hung up, it's not a teaching. And so the idea would be, if it's addressing where the obstacles or impediments are, it's Dharma, and if it's not for you Dharma. But Dharma is not some absolute that exists outside of the human condition and the human entanglements and the human potential. And that's why he says earlier, all the sutras of the 12 divisions of canon are spoken for people. And it's because of people that they're spoken. And if there were no people, there wouldn't be any Dharma. I'm quoting Hui Neng. This is not me doing some postmodern riff here, okay? And that's what he says. But then he says, interesting, it's because of wisdom nature of people that it's spoken, which means it's only spoken because there's a potential for this awakening within the human. So it's really interesting how this goes. And he's just reaffirming this here. So he says, why did direct and gradual come around? It's not that the Dharma itself is direct and gradual. It's rather that people are either quick or dull. And this, by the way, is not referring to what we might call smart or even educated. I want to say the educated people are quick and those who are not educated are dull. Why wouldn't this be the case, just from this text? Any examples in this text of a dichotomy between quick, dull, intelligent, not so? The Sixth Patriarch himself is, quote, illiterate. Okay, so this is what you have here. It's a very interesting. Shen Shu himself, we know, is very educated. He's very literate. But he doesn't have the robe and bowl. Now, Hui Neng, on the other hand, is illiterate. He's not well read at all. What he's learned by hearing in the various monasteries, the texts that he's heard. And yet, he has the robe and bowl. Moreover, Shen Shu is, I don't want to use this word wrongly, he's politically correct in the sense that what he teaches is what everybody in this time and space takes to be the teaching. And Hui Neng seems to be a little contradictory or contrary. You remember these earlier chapters where the prefect Wei asked him, well, what about reciting the name of the Buddha for rebirth in the Pure Land? And he said, well, that's an inducement to practice, but better than reciting the name of the Buddha is to become a Buddha, become your own Buddha. And no matter how long you recite, if your heart isn't wholesome and clean, what Buddha is going to come to welcome you? On the other hand, if your mind is wholesome and clean, that is the Pure Land. So that's a little contrary to what most people at the time were thinking. They were thinking, if I recite a lot and whatnot, I'll build up a kind of bank account of merit and virtue that then will cash in for Pure Land rebirth. And the Patriarch's saying, no, that's not the mind for the way. That's actually looking outside and you won't get there. He does the same thing with meditation. He does the same thing with bowing. Even the act of taking refuge, becoming a Buddhist, he turns around and says you have to take refuge with the Buddha of your own nature, the Dharma of your own nature, and the Sangha of your own nature. Very different than what most people think about. So in this way, people wonder, he's illiterate, he's a bit of a bumpkin, and he doesn't teach the standard way. So there's doubts about how can he be the one. So then the followers of Shen Shu, it says, we go on to read this, nevertheless often criticized the Southern Patriarch for being illiterate and questioned his achievement. But Shen Shu himself said, he's reached awakening without the benefit of teacher and deeply understands the supreme vehicle. I am not his equal. Furthermore, my master, the fifth patriarch, personally bequeathed the robe and the teaching to him. How could that have been an error? I regret that I cannot make the long journey to be close to him, yet I receive state patronage without deserving it. You should not linger here. Go to Shaoxi and resolve your doubts. Ooh, this is pretty rich. So it says, it seems as if at least Hui Neng's disciples maybe after they heard this, or enough of a drumming of it into their heads not to fight and compete and think we're better than you or something, sort of got this message of this direct and gradual is just a difference in potentials. It's not a difference in the teaching, really. But it says Shen Shu's disciples criticized the Southern Patriarch, meaning Hui Neng, because he was illiterate and questioned his achievement. And again, at this time, literacy and eloquence in preaching was thought to go hand in hand with awakening. Or you could say, if you wanted to use a non-Buddhist term, grace, or presence, or even virtue. And what Hui Neng is pointing out is, while literacy is good, it's not essential for awakening. And literacy can be necessary to some term, because we talk about, especially in a time when you don't have a teacher, it's really important to study the teachings to get a grounding in the theory. But the actual awakening comes through self-transformation, the changing of klesha and bad habits and faults into the opposite. And that doesn't require learning per se. It requires sincerity and self-cultivation. And that was Hui Neng's accomplishment. Although he didn't have that, his heart was so true and pure, and his resolve was so steady that eventually he broke through his afflictions and transformed them and had a profound understanding. And all of that came about through that direct cultivation. So what Shen Shu is said to himself, he says, he awakened without the benefit of a teacher. Well, yes, it's true and not true. He did have the same teacher that Shen Shu had. But at the same time, he came in already in a state of awakening that was just polished and refined under his tutelage. Whereas Shen Shu himself never had that direct experience. And so it says he deeply understood the vehicle. He understood the ultimate teaching through his direct comprehension of it, right from his own mind and heart. And the teachings only confirmed what he came to understand. And that's what the Fifth Patriarch. Fifth Patriarch didn't give him this. The Fifth Patriarch merely said, you understand this. And this is really critical, because some people think that this Dharma is transmitted, in sort of behind closed doors, or in a secret ceremony, or in a special envelope, or even in your dreams or something. And what it says is, he bequeaths the robe and bowl to him as a symbol of his understanding, not as a catalyst for it. Get the robe and bowl and go, whoa, it's like the movie version. The robe and bowl come, you grab it, and all the lights come on and the music goes on, awakening. No, it doesn't happen like that at all. He has got the awakening, so the master gives him the robe and bowl as a symbol of that achievement, but not as the achievement itself. So this is really critical. And again, you see why the hungering for that robe and bowl is so misplaced. It's as if you got it, what would you get? How would you actually get awakening by having the robe and bowl? But if you have the awakening, the robe and bowl don't matter. And that's why Hongren says to him, after mine, the robe and bowl should not be transmitted past you, because it's such an area of contention and people get so confused and forget to practice. So he says he's got it. And then he asks this question. Now, I've been reading this with my class, and there's different ways that people, I'm just throwing this out for you for interpretation. What do you make of his statement here, Shen Shu's statement? In other words, if I were saying to you, cast this as a movie version from the side as director, how would you tell Shen Shu to say this? Would he say, he's reached awakening without the benefit of the teacher, deeply understands I'm not his equal, as a really sincere, humble, direct statement that you go, wow, this guy is, even though he doesn't have it, he's willing to acknowledge the accomplishment in someone else in a very sincere way. And he says, and he got the robe and bowl from my teacher. And then how could that have been an error? Because my teacher was awakened master. Okay, and so you could read this, And then he'd say, and I regret, I really want to go study with him, but I can't make the long journey to be close to him. It's too far away for me to go. And also, I receive state patronage without deserving it. Now, this could be read as a very candid, humble self-assessment and would be very moving. However, some of my students said, you could read this with a little twinge, with a little twist and say, yeah, he's kind of saying that, but really, when he says, how could that be an error? He could mean like, yeah, maybe it was an error. And when he says, I can't make the long journey, why not? Why couldn't he make the long journey? And some people say, well, because he's committed to state patronage, and other people read it like he's just making an excuse not to have to confront his situation. So I don't know how you would cast this, how you would read this. And then he says, I received state patronage without deserving of it. Now, the next question somebody might ask, so do you kind of like that state patronage and build up on it? Or do you distribute it widely? Or, but how would you read it? Just a couple people.
I sense his humility.
Huh?
I do not sense.
You do not sense humility. Well, I tried to do the first one. I was really saying, no, okay.
I think he's sincere.
You think he's sincere? Okay. Yeah, our class sort of split.
I think he's sincere in the sense that, in terms of the consistency of his previous experience with the turning in reverse, he knows he's not there, but he's got this huge apparatus that's forcing him to be a particular way. So he's got an inner sincerity and also an understanding he's not awakening, and the pressure of being put forward a certain way. So it's like very complex experience for him. So he's very good at keeping up a very good image.
So this apparatus you're talking about that sort of obstructs that sincerity of intent, what is that exactly? What is he being pushed, or is he pulling himself into it?
I think it's probably both. My sense is he's probably a very nice guy. Why people want to support him? Because he's probably a very nice guy.
He's a nice guy.
And he wants to do the right thing.
Okay.
But by doing that and do the whole structure of it, you get caught in the structure.
No, this is very interesting. I don't think you can just say one way or the other that it's either, because the text leaves it open for that. And that's a nicer reading in the sense that you would like him better if he was really sincere, really trying, but he just couldn't quite get it. And yet, then he ends up in a position of great responsibility, onerous responsibility, I might say. Now he's the head of this big monastery where the fifth patriarch was, and he's got state patronage. For a monk, basically, this means you got a chain on your neck. I'm sorry. You got to do all the ceremonies and rituals that are expected to maintain the balance of the state between heaven and earth. Just as they're done in the Forbidden City by the emperor, who's also got a chain around his neck, a gilded one or a gold one, but still a chain, is tied to producing offspring and is tied to performing the rites and rituals that keep everything in order, the tianming, the mandate of heaven. And so this is not like, oh, isn't it great to be an emperor? No, it's like you're a bird in a cage, right? It sucks, okay? And you thought maybe you're going to get all this stuff. Yeah, you get the good food and whatnot, but every place you go, you're surrounded by people, and every time you wake up, there's rituals and ceremonies you have to do to maintain this order, and there's hundreds of people coming to see you, to complain, to seek favors, and so on and so forth. And behind your back, there's all this espionage, intrigue to get rid of you, and so forth and so. So now, the head of the monastery here doesn't have quite that much, but he did get a little bit. Because you remember, when the fifth patriarch was there, they were greedy for the robe and bowl. So he kind of had to watch his back. I remember one of the stories from one of the Chan monasteries where someone came wanting to get the Dharma because they heard this master had the awakening. And he watched and waiting for the Dharma. And then he noticed how that master was talking to different disciples and say, well, try this practice. And, oh, that's really good you had this understanding. And he never paid attention to him. And finally, this disciple got so mad and so angry because he said, like, time's running out. You're getting old and you're going to die. And you're not going to give me the Dharma before you die. So he went to his room with a knife and he says, give me the Dharma, I'll cut your throat to the patriarch. And why don't you give it to me? I've been here long. I'm really trying. And the patriarch said to him, I've been wanting to give it to you, but there's no place to put it. It was, meaning his heart was filled with this lust for the Dharma and the robe and bowl, and there was no place to get this. But what I'm saying is being patriarchs and being emperors are equally troublesome in this setting. Now in America it's not so bad now because America doesn't even know what a patriarch is, and so you can be one pretty much incognito. And we don't have emperors, we have equivalents, but any event. But that state patronage, I want to point out to you, is a mixed blessing. This is bittersweet. Yes, it's an endorsement, but with this comes responsibility. Moreover, what comes with it, because for example, when we look at Han Shan, he gets put in prison. And he gets in prison because if you don't stay on the good side of the state, not only do you lose your patronage, but you lose your body, you get put in jail. So in the intrigues of the palace, people are coming to these higher monks to get endorsement for their various positions. We're going to invade country so-and-so. Will you give us your blessing? The Dharma blessing. Oh, no, this is how it works. So-and-so's concubine had a son. We want you to tell him that this is not the official heir to the throne. This is a demon. No, this is how these monks get hit up, and they take one side or the other, and it's really dangerous. And that's Han Shan got caught in one of these palace intrigues and ended up in prison for quite a long time. So he was erudite, and he was learned, and he was awakened, and he still went to jail. So this is not necessarily a liberating thing. So whether he says, I would like to go and I cannot, not only because I cannot make the long journey, meaning I'd be away for a long time, but I can't give up my duties. And maybe he means even if I wouldn't be so much losing face as I would be indicating that my state patronage and all this was in question. Why would I go to receive the teaching from somebody else, which might cause, I might be very compassionate, he said, if I did this, the political rifts and things that would spin off of this would be really too ugly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Shen Shu was sincere because
You think he's sincere?
Shen Shu was sincere. Many reasons. Because first, he already spent decades with the Fifth Patriarch.
Okay.
Now there's a new Sixth Patriarch. So earlier you said that liberation only comes from the self-transformation. The teacher can only show you the way you have to work on it. So now you're going to see another new enlightened master. How is he going to do anything? He's going to do the self-transformation, right? He already heard the same thing from the Fifth Patriarch.
Oh.
Why that's going to make some difference? He's going to see another new Patriarch. So he knows that. He must do it. So he's not looking around.
This is good. No, this is very good. No, I like what you're saying.
But you need to do it. It's like you're looking.
So, let me twist it just another. This is very good. So he knows that, right? He knows he has to himself, why go? Or could it be, he knows when he goes, he'll be twisted again, just like he was with Hong Ren. So he comes, and the Sixth Patriarch says, oh, you're here. Why did you come here? Well, I came to get the teaching. And he said, well, you left it behind. The teaching was where you were, not where I am. Going back to your thing. I remember there was an American disciple early on who went to study with Shu Yun in China. And she made this journey long, and it was difficult for her to make this journey. And I don't know exactly, but I think she was also a little bit proud of herself for going through such difficulty and being sincere. I mean, we're talking, wow, in the early 1910s or 1920s, when most Americans, thought the Buddha was an exotic creature on the verge of extinction. I mean, this is really true. And she comes to him, and very sincerely, in the translator, and he said, why are you here? I'm here to get awakened. I've come for the Dharma. And he said, well, you wasted your time. You should go home. And she immediately had this knee-jerk reaction like, well, not only did he not respect me, but he's really rude. And then she had a small awakening. She realized what he was saying to her, the Dharma is in your own essential nature. And if you cultivate that, no matter where you are, Ohio or Hong Kong, but why did you come here to seek for that? So in his teaching, but what happens if Shen Shu goes to Shaoxi and why are you here? I've come for the Dharma, well, and he gets that again. So, or he says, compose a verse and we'll see. Then he's back into that one. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. I've been asked to stop on time tonight. It's not too late to change my bad habits. So, one day, Shen Shu instructed his disciple, Zhi Cheng, you are bright and very knowledgeable. Go to Shaoxi for me and listen to his teaching. Remember, record everything you hear so you can tell me all about it when you come back. Now, again, you could read this as he really wants to have the teaching. He can't make the journey, but he would like to learn what the Sixth Patriarch is teaching, and maybe he could incorporate it into his own teaching. And so he sends his best and most able disciple. Now we would just do a tape recorder or something, but he sends his disciple to get this information. Some people read this as he's testing his disciples. In other words, if they go, they'll show that they're not really loyal to him. So he's opening a door, but he's actually seeing, are you really followers or believers of me? You could read this two different ways, again, based on our motif. One motif, your motif, with his less than humble. Now he's, oh yeah, go to Oakland. Don't come here on Friday night. Oakland has this place that's really a great teen, and whatnot. And you go and say, okay, look who's not here. Okay, she left. Or you could say, really go. I hope you find it. I haven't been able to do it myself, but I hope you can get it. I've taught you all I can teach you. You're very bright. You need to move on. Different ways to read this.
Marty,
Yes.
why he pick a disciple with that smart, 聪明多智? I mean, why he find a smart and intellectual disciple, not other kind of disciple?
Good question. Good question. So if I go back, why would he send his most intelligent, bright, and very knowledgeable?
Well, I don't know about the bright and knowledgeable.
Uh-huh.
If you want to go learn something, my sense of it, you can actually understand it. But my sense is that this move is actually also very consistent with the verse. Because the way that he tries to solve this problem.
That goes back to what you were
is
saying.
actually
Yeah.
applied. So it's interesting because he wrote the verse on the wall at the end. He actually isn't able to own up to actually doing something. So he does it kind of on the slide.
Mm-hmm.
So he's sincere, but he's got other qualities too in his own mind.
This is sometimes called the thorn of learning, or the thorn of literacy, in that because you can learn and because you can acquire knowledge in this way, there's a thorn part of it. You grab it like you grab a rose, and you think you're getting the rose, but you're also getting the thorn when you grab it, and that it actually obstructs direct knowing, because then you attach to the knowledge and views and the pride that comes with this knowledge and views, and it actually becomes an impediment rather than a lubricant for liberation. So this is very interesting because maybe following this, he's still thinking that it's something that's learned or acquired through increase of knowledge. So this is why in this tradition, I mentioned this before, there's a concept called learning by subtraction. And that's going to the direct teaching. Learning by subtraction means you learn by letting go of your afflictions, your bad habits, your faults, your opinionated views, your sort of stubbornness and so forth. You become soft and open. You become receptive. And that's learning by subtraction. You pull away anything that impedes a direct... The model of learning by addition is the opposite. You think by acquiring more and more knowledge, reading more and more extensively, by filling yourself with this body of knowledge, you'll get it. But in fact, in the Tao, in the way, in this learning by subtraction is the paradigm, whereas learning by addition can be an obstruction. If you learn by addition to and then really practice, that's why I said after reading 10,000 books, walk 10,000 miles. then you got that blend. But if you just read 10,000 and then you download another 10,000 and another 10,000, you end up burdened by knowledge. This is the obstacle of what is known in some sense. There's two obstacles. What's the other one, Frank? One's the obstacle of what is known, and then what's the obstacle of afflictions. So there's two obstacles in cultivation. One is the emotional afflictions, the negative emotions that obstruct. But there's also the obstacle of what's called what is known, which is the hanging on to opinions and views or just intellectual knowledge for its own sake and not really getting free. And as you get older and as you start to wear down, you start to realize, wait a minute, what have all these books and all these degrees really amounted to? And this is actually something that Mark Twain wrote about towards the end of his life. He asked, all of this, and then the fame that went with him, what does it amount to? It doesn't even amount to a flower blooming on a hot day and then fading. It's really interesting. So this is kind of a universal thing, but we fool ourselves in thinking that in getting this we've got something, only to see it slip through our fingers when we're actually facing our own mortality. Okay, so he says, remember everything you can tell me, and then when you come back, you'll get it. Well, we'll lead into this so we get a little edge here for tomorrow. Next Friday's the last class of the semester. Someone encouraged me to make it tonight, but I'm going to go one more week because the end of the semester we got so much on our plate with the closing of the semester, and then we're making a trip to Taiwan around Christmas. So I have to sort of get ready for that. So next Friday will be our last class. But let's get a little edge here going on this one and see. So as ordered, Zhi Cheng went to Shaoxi. There he joined the assembly without saying where he had come from. At the time, Patriarch announced the assembly, today there's a thief hiding among you who has come to steal the teaching. Zhi Cheng immediately stepped forward and bowed and told the whole story behind his mission. The master said, you're from Jade Spring, you must be a spy. Not so, he replied. The master asked, how can you not be? And I love this answer. This is really great. Before I confessed I was, but now that I've admitted to it, I'm not. I mean, that's just so lovely. In the annals of espionage, this one goes down as a blunker. You know?
He's so smart, man.
He is smart, isn't he? So he did spend his most knowledgeable and bright disciple.
But perhaps that also reflects the original intention when Shen Shu sent him.
Say that again?
That reflects the original, maybe the mixed intention when he was sent by Shen Shu.
Meaning what? That
This representative that he sent, right? Like sometimes you send a delegate, right? The intention can be very like I truly could not go. I sent a representative on my behalf, right? And if it's truly wholesome, then you probably wouldn't see this kind of exchange, right? Sometimes you can't go. You send someone, and it's an open exchange. It's like I can't be here, but I send this on my behalf. But my intentionality is to come and pay my respects, or to engage, or as part of like a delegation, as a respectful visit, right? But this exchange is anything but.
it could be. On the other hand, you're wondering, because these are formal monasteries where they are. And so when a guest comes, you usually come to the front door, you announce yourself, you show your ordination certificate to show that you are indeed a bhikshu or a bhikshuni. The guest prefect meets you and guides you to a room and everything. So there's a kind of like checking into a hotel, but a little more elaborate. So in a sense, to get to where he was actually sitting there, he probably wasn't as straightforward as he should have been in saying who he was and where he was from. But Hui Neng, being who he was, just kind of looks around and kind of picks up. He's got a way of seeing people deeply into them and then picks up. But at the same time, we'll see whether he's doing this to get under his skin or just to bring him out a little bit. In other words, to open him up for some teaching, because that's going to come next time. So we have to wait until next week. But he's going to ask, instead of him asking the Sixth Patriarch, how do you teach? The Sixth Patriarch turns it in his next paragraph. It's very interesting. He says, how does your master instruct his followers? And Zhechung replies, he instructs his students to stop the mind and contemplate stillness, to sit upright at all times without lying down. And that's where we'll stop tonight. Because it's sort of like, that sounds pretty good, right? Well, we already know that. But what's interesting, instead of waiting to be asked what he's teaching, he asks him what his master teaches. The one thing I would just say, and we'll go into this next week and see, because this is a very important chapter. Let me suggest something here about literacy, illiteracy, and brightness. My understanding of this coming out of the Chinese side of this, and to some extent I would say most of South and East Asian thought, is that there's two ways that brightness or intellect is looked at. One is the sense that we know that the mind is quick to make connections and see possibilities, to interpolate and extrapolate. As Confucius says, I pick up one corner and the smart, bright student can pick up the other three. And where someone is dull, you pick up one corner and they go, why'd you pick up that? And you pick up the second one, they're going, oh, you got two corners. And you pick up the third one and you get the fourth one and they forgot you picked up the first one. So, but that sense we know. And that has to do with an alacrity of mind, a quickness of seeing things and connections and so forth. But there's a deeper sense here in that tradition I'm talking about. And the Chinese character Ming is used for both Mingde, meaning brightness of virtue, but also Congming for intelligence. And this is what we have to pay attention to. When we say bright here, it's not simply meaning someone's got a high IQ or they aced their SATs in this sense. But what it means is to have a goodness and a purity of heart that radiates a kind of light. The Ming character is the sun and moon put together. And so it's talking about a moral clarity, a unselfishness, a altruism. And there's no manipulations or interior motives. This is really, they say, like true jade. It has this glow and this light. And when they're talking about brightness here, and when he's saying, when you look at Hui Neng, he wasn't literate. But don't mistake that for not being bright. It's a very different thing because, and in a sense, the ancient traditions have said that the point of learning was to have the first brightness first, the brightness of virtue and goodness. That then, when the brush of knowledge was added on top of it, was a tool of transformation to yourself and the whole world. If, however, you did not have the first one and you had the brightness of knowledge, not only would it not bring you through to spiritual accomplishment, but could harm the world. Because the guiding wisdom and compassion that was with the first brightness wasn't joined to the other one. So this idea of knowledge without virtue can not only sometimes be sterile, but can actually be deadly. And, having the virtue without the knowledge, no problem. If you ask your choice, would you rather have a world full of just good, virtuous people or, as opposed to smart ones who weren't? I would go for the first one. But the better, of course, is to have them combined. So in this sense, when we look at educational models, both within the monastery and contemporary education, we should be looking to this one to ask, are we educating both brightnesses? And shouldn't that be the goal of not only elementary and secondary, but higher education, is to bring these back into alignment? Because a lot of our problems come from this imbalance of having great intelligence but not great virtue behind it. So my little editorial tonight but this, I want to understand what he's talking about here when he takes disciples and he says they're quick and bright, he means both of these. Both of these. Otherwise, they never will get it. So, and tonight we'll do one more class next week and see if we can finish this section and then pick up in February. Yeah, end of January, beginning of February. So, any announcements or questions? No more questions. We're out of time. Any announcements? In the back. Yes?
So, the whole process goes.
Maybe come up and grab a mic.
Okay. So, tomorrow we have a lecture led by Reverend Heng Shur, 7:30 p.m. On Mondays, Buddhism for the Modern Mind, led by Doug Powers. What is the topic? Prajna Paramita, Six Perfections, with Doug Powers.
It's a
on
new
Mondays.
app that you can download that on Monday night.
And on Tuesday we have Abhayagiri monks, Ajahn Kuradamo will coming. On 5 o'clock is Tea and Dhamma, 7:30 Dhamma talk and meditation. So this will be last time before 4th month winter retreat. So on Wednesday, Stephen Taylor, 7:30 his class. Thursday it's East Bay meditation, and Friday last class here.
Last class. I had a busy full week here. Okay.
I just have another announcement, is that it's a tradition of the Friday night meditation that around this time each year, like next to the last class usually, we have a get together in the back. So you all are welcome, invited to go to the back of the monastery for tea and cake. And I guess it so happens to be someone's rebirth day. So we'll meet up in the back after our conference.
Do you want to do the we'll do the transference in English.